Welcome to Candidate Profiles, brought to you by Millis Community Media. I'm Peter Themistocles. I'm a member of the Millis Community Media Board of Directors, and I'm happy to host these profiles. Our Candidate Profiles series is designed to help you, the Millis voters, become more acquainted with the candidates in this May's local election. All the candidates, opposed or unopposed, were invited to our studios for 15 minutes to answer questions submitted by Millis residents. I will ask the questions on behalf of the residents and will allow approximately 1.5 minutes for each answer before moving to the next question. Each candidate will have 1 minute at the beginning and the finish for opening and closing statements. Joining me now is Stephen Catalano, a candidate running for re-election to the school committee. Hi, Stephen. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you for the opportunity.
Great. Please take it away with your opening statement.
So I am a Millis resident since 2004. My wife and I have 2 children, Jessica, who is a freshman in college, and my son, Jack, who is a sophomore in the high school. I've been on the school committee since 2010. I was elected. I was fortunate enough to be elected in the spring while Jack was still in preschool, so now he's a 10th grader. So I've done 11 years, and I'm hoping and running unopposed, but I want to finish out his high school career, and then at that point I'll make a decision on my future on the school committee. I have found the school committee to be a very rewarding opportunity. It's had its challenges. We've had our ups and downs. We've had issues here and there, but overall I like and appreciate the ability to give back to the community with something that I really care about, education. I have part-time jobs in higher education, so it was a good opportunity for me to give back to the community, participate in the school committee, and I've seen the schools really grow and prosper over my last 11 years.
Thank you so much. And now we'll get to the questions submitted by Millis voters. The first, what do you see as your key priorities in the next term on the school committee, in your next term on the school committee, and what will you do to address them? Please be specific.
So I think we are not at the tail end of COVID. We're still in the middle of it, but I think we're progressing. So clearly that is still the number one priority for us, is to maintain a safe environment for the students, the staff in the buildings. Thankfully, we are at a point now where all of the elementary school students are back in as of last week. Actually of this week, I'm sorry, April 5th. The middle school will be transitioning in April, and last night we took a vote, and the high school students will be returning the week of May 3rd. So we will have some semblance of normality. Still, it's not going to be exactly the same, but we'll have much fuller buildings than we've had since last March. So that's still a priority for the school committee. I think in the longer term, over the next 3 years, we had a discussion about this last night, we need to address the middle school, high school building itself. We are definitely towards to the end of useful life for some of the kind of the mechanical systems, the roof, not necessarily the forward-facing things, but behind the scenes. And so we are started the process of looking at seeking funding from the Massachusetts School Building Authority to look at our opportunities for a rehab and possibly addition on the middle school, high school. And I think that would be overarching, not just for me, but anyone on the committee, our number one goal for the next several years, beyond getting the kids back into the building safe and secure.
Just a little clarity on what you're describing as being when in need of repair. Is it when you say behind the scenes? It means sort of like physical plant type of stuff.
Yes.
Physical plant type of stuff?
Yes, exactly. Mechanical systems, roof. So not necessarily when the Clyde Brown when it was at its end, the cafeteria roof, the ceiling was horrendous. There were buckets everywhere capturing water. Okay. It was really visible. The building was kind of really, as much as we tried to maintain it and upkeep, it was showing its age. This building had a newer rehab. It's not as old and not as kind of at that point. So it's more the heating and ventilation. There's some plumbing issues, and clearly the roof is an issue. So when I say behind the scenes, it's less of, you won't necessarily see it unless you know what you're looking for, or you're behind closed doors in these systems.
Gotcha. Okay, very good. Thank you for that clarity. We appreciate it. You referenced the COVID pandemic. Let me ask an official question from a Millis resident about that. One of the biggest issues on the school committee has dealt with is the COVID-19 pandemic. What are some of the toughest factors that the school committee has had to consider to address educating the students while keeping the schools safe?
The last, we're 13 months in, right? On March 13th, the kids were sent home for, I think, 2 weeks. And they gathered as much of their books and the one-for-one devices, and went home, and we didn't know how long it was going to be. And then that 2 weeks stretched into a month, and then a month and a half, and then it was, you're not coming back until September. And since that point, it is fair to say that the committee as a whole, and then individual subcommittees, had been meeting nonstop. Obviously more in the very beginning, to try to figure out how can we educate, how can we ensure that everyone is getting the services that they need. And I say, how can we? The school committee doesn't do direct services. We work with the admin team to make sure that they have the resources available, and the school committee is solely responsible for budget and policy. So we're very limited in scope, but we want to work together with the admin team to ensure that kids get educated. And I think it's fair to say that Millis was no different than any other school district in the state, and probably in the country, that the last spring wasn't perfect by any means. I think we got through it, and I think we learned a lot of lessons. And over the summer, as we were planning for what education would look like in September, we learned from those lessons. The one thing I would say, the one bright spot, is that the district, going on almost when I first got on the committee back in 11, and we started a one-to-one initiative, and it was very limited in scope. Now everyone in the district has a device. And so we were in a position when March 13th occurred, that Friday, we were ready, at least from a device management standpoint. And we've talked to a lot of other committees, and they weren't in the same position. So I'm not saying it's a silver lining, but at least because of the admin team and in the focus on technology, it helped us at least in that part. And then I think making the decision on what was safe in September. And we chose to be remote until October. And right after Columbus Day, we brought the students back in a hybrid, the 2 cohorts. And then we were struck, like everyone else in the state and around the country, with a couple different waves. And things were very difficult from Thanksgiving through early February. We started the conversations about trying to bring everyone back in January and early February. And then finally we got into the position, and we were moving in that direction before the state put the mandates out. And so there's a lot behind these decisions and a lot of planning, but I wanted to give you the highlights. So I will tell you that every teacher and every administrator in that building from March of last year through today is constantly thinking about the best ways to improve and provide the best education to the students.
Excellent. Thank you so much. What are some of the biggest budget challenges that are facing the school committee right now, or the schools right now?
Well, we just had the budget hearing. The superintendent, our new superintendent, Bob Mullaney, who was the high school principal, great person, great so far, has done a stellar job as the superintendent. I have no doubt that will continue. He did his budget presentation, and one of the questions we asked him was to break down the percentage of staff in the overall budget. And if I'm not mistaken, I think we were about 90% staff, and we had about 95% hard costs, meaning they were coming back no matter what. So most of that is staff, but then we have some expenses that are reoccurring expenses, leases and licensing. So part of the issue is if the revenue growth is small, right, we still have these hard costs. And then when there are moments in time when we have to reduce revenue or revenue projections are down and we have to reduce our spending, how do we do it without impacting staff? And that has been, we've had a few cycles of trying to keep our cost at a minimum. And then when we do have had less revenue, how do we not impact the staff? Because the last thing we want is staff going out the door. But we can't let the infrastructure or the books, and we can't let all of the other hard cost of expenses go, because if you keep on pushing the can down the road, it'll come back to haunt you later on.
Good, excellent. Thank you. That's very clear. One last question before your closing statement. Your experience on the school committee led you to essentially being on the team that built the new Clyde Brown School. And I remember as a parent with the kids in the system at the time, your name was on a lot of that went on. I was wondering if there was, and as we now face perhaps a new horizon with the new building, maybe, or whatever that might become. Stephen, can you reflect on that experience, and is there maybe one sort of overriding thing, learning or impression that you've walked away from that experience?
I was one person, but very much part of a team. And there were a lot of people, both on the school committee, within the buildings, and then eventually outside. It took a lot to get the word out because it was a very big ask, right? We were spending the most money that this town has ever spent. And I think it was important to demonstrate and show the taxpayers why we needed to do it and the breakdown of the cost, and to be as transparent as possible. I also think another lesson learned is we waited too long to address the Clyde Brown. And we kept on pushing it down and pushing it down the road. And then eventually it got to the point of, we are having problems here, significant problems. And I think that was a lesson learned. I don't think we were any different than the police station, the fire station, the library. I think we were a small town and we're trying to balance all of these demands, and infrastructure and capital projects kind of got put to the back burner. I will say, separate from the project itself, that the fact that there is a capital planning committee now in town is really helpful. There's some really good work and hard work being done. I think over the last 3 years, I think we're in a much better place to look at the big picture of what we need as a town. So I think one thing as a taxpayer, not just as a school committee member, is I want to make sure we don't just delay the inevitable, because then we're forced to make decisions if we're in an emergency situation that may not be best. So I think proper planning and really understanding that we're just handling the money for the taxpayers, and that they have to have voice and they have to be heard, and that they should understand why this is necessary.
Thank you. Thank you for your candor there. And now you have your minute for your closing statement.
Did I answer all of your questions?
You did.
If there's any outstanding.
No, we went through all of them. Thank you.
I love being on the school committee. There's been a lot of work, but it's a voluntary job, right? It's an unpaid job. I brought it on to myself, but I very much appreciate the opportunity to give back to the community. And when it was my turn to kind of figure it out, when the kids got to the point where I thought I could give a little more time outside of the house, not knowing exactly how long, I picked the schools because, one, there was a position open. And so I ran opposed the first 2 times I ran. And I have found it to be rewarding to see the quality of we've always had good education. We are a very highly ranked high school. The Clyde Brown, the middle school, are ranked school, not ranked, they don't rank them, but very sought after and very thought of. So being part of that in a very limited way has been meaningful for me. And I'm happy for the opportunity to see my son walk across the stage and hand him his diploma, because that's the one perk a school committee member gets, is you get to hand your son or daughter their diploma. So I'm looking forward to that. I may not miss the long hours, but you know what? I'll find something else to do. But I'm going to work hard every day for at least the next 2 years, and then maybe finish out my term. We'll see. But I'm happy to give back. I love this town. I love giving back, and I just I appreciate the opportunity. I don't take it for granted.
Great. Well, thank you, Stephen Catalano, for joining our candidate profile series
I
today.
appreciate the opportunity.
Excellent. And thank you for watching. And we'll see you all at the polls on May 10th.